Have you ever met someone who seemed indestructible? Someone who faced life's worst storms without showing a single crack in their armor? Now imagine discovering that behind all that strength, there was a pain so deep that a simple forgotten notebook could make everything crumble in a matter of seconds. This is the true story of Marcus Thompson, the soldier who spent 12 whole years without shedding a single tear, until the past came knocking at his door in a way he could never have imagined. Marcus wasn't just another war veteran. He was known among his platoon mates as the man of steel, the one who remained calm when bombs exploded around him, who carried the wounded on his shoulders while bullets sliced through the air, who never wavered in the face of danger, not even when he lost half his platoon in that brutal ambush in Kandahar. Not even when he returned home to Portland and realized that no one really recognized him anymore because the man who went to war wasn't the same one who stepped off the plane. And have you ever stopped to think about the weight of carrying that kind of loneliness? That feeling of being surrounded by people, but completely isolated within your own mind. For Marcus, crying was synonymous with weakness. It was what he had learned since childhood, growing up in a family where men didn't show emotions, where vulnerability was seen as a character flaw. So he built walls around his heart, brick by brick, year after year, until those walls became a prison from which he no longer knew how to escape. And the scariest thing of all, he genuinely believed he was okay. That moving on meant burying the past so deep that not even he could reach it. But life has a peculiar way of confronting us with what we try to forget. Stay with me until the end, because what happened to Marcus may completely change how you see strength, courage, and transformation. In March 2015, 7 years after leaving the army, Marcus received a box. A simple box sent by a mother who was still grieving the loss of her son. Inside were carefully folded military uniforms, medals that shone despite the time, faded photos of smiling young men who had no idea what was to come. And at the bottom, wrapped in brown paper, a diary that Marcus never knew existed. That diary belonged to James Rodriguez, Jimmy, his best friend, the brother the war took on that fateful afternoon in 2011. Marcus avoided opening that notebook for days, maybe even weeks. Have you ever been through that? That moment when you know that if you cross a certain line, there's no turning back? Something inside him whispered that those pages contained more than just combat memories. And he was right. When he finally found the courage to read, Marcus discovered that Jimmy wasn't just recording his days in Afghanistan. He was pouring his soul into those lines, confessing his deepest fears, his dreams for a future that never came. But it was on the last page that everything changed. A letter addressed directly to him, words written by someone who knew he might not return, but who still cared more about his friend than his own fate. What you are about to discover may surprise you, because that letter not only broke the 12-year silence, it initiated a journey of transformation so profound that Marcus would become unrecognizable. Not because of the war, but because of the healing. And it all began with a simple question that Jimmy had written on that piece of paper, yellowed with age, a question that would echo in Marcus's mind for years. And it all began with a simple question that Jimmy had written on that piece of paper, yellowed with age. A question that would echo in Marcus's mind for years. Marcus, brother, when was the last time you truly felt something? When was the last time you allowed yourself to be human? Those words pierced the armor Marcus had so carefully constructed. And perhaps you're wondering now, why would such a simple question have so much power? Because it touched on something we've all experienced on some level. That moment when we realize we're just surviving, not living. That we're so busy being strong that we've forgotten what it means to be true to ourselves. You know, if this story is resonating with you in any way, if you've ever felt trapped inside your own emotional fortress, Or if you know someone who carries this silent weight, I'd like to ask you something. Leave a comment below about what has touched you the most so far. It can be a word, a phrase, or even your own experience. Because when you share, you not only help this channel grow and reach more people who need to hear this message, you also create a support network for those watching in silence, feeling alone. And if you're not yet subscribed to the channel, hit that subscribe button and activate the bell. Because every week I bring real stories like this one, proving that transformation is possible even after the worst storms. Your participation here, with a like, a comment, a subscription, is what makes this work meaningful and reaches those who need it most. Returning to Marcus's story, when he finished reading that letter, something extraordinary happened. For the first time in 12 years, his hands began to tremble. Not from fear, not from anger, but from something he had learned to suppress so deeply that he no longer even recognized it. Returning to Marcus's story, when he finished reading that letter, something extraordinary happened. For the first time in 12 years, his hands began to tremble. Not from fear, not from anger, but from something he had learned to suppress so deeply that he no longer even recognized it. Pure, raw vulnerability. And to understand the devastating impact of that moment, we need to go back in time and learn who Marcus Thompson really was before he became the legend of the Man of Steel. Marcus was born in Richmond, Virginia, into a family where emotions were seen as obstacles to success. His father, a factory worker who rarely smiled, used to say that the world was too hard for weak men. When Marcus was 8 years old and cried after losing the family dog, his father locked him in his room and said he could only come out when he stopped acting like a girl. That was the last time Marcus cried in front of anyone during his childhood. He learned early on that feeling was dangerous, that showing pain was an invitation to rejection. So he did what many children do when the world demands they grow up too fast. He built a mask and glued it to his face so tightly that he forgot he was wearing one. In his adolescence, Marcus channeled all that emotional rigidity into sports. American football, boxing, anything that required physical and mental strength. He was good, very good. But there was something about him that the coaches noticed, an almost frightening determination, as if he were always proving something to someone invisible. At 18, without money for college and without clear prospects, Marcus made the decision that would change his life forever. He enlisted in the army. For him, it made perfect sense. The army valued exactly what he had spent his whole life developing: discipline, resilience, the ability to keep going no matter what. And he excelled. During basic training at Fort Benning, Georgia, Marcus quickly became the soldier everyone admired. He didn't complain about 40-kilometer marches under the scorching sun. He didn't hesitate when instructors yelled inches from his face. He didn't show fatigue when others crumbled. His mentality was simple and brutal. Pain is temporary, giving up is permanent. Within 5 years, he was already a sergeant, leading a platoon of young soldiers who saw him as a kind of indestructible superhero. Marcus Thompson, the man who never wavered, who never doubted, who never ever showed weakness. But there was a cost to all that invincibility. A cost Marcus wouldn't let anyone see. Nights he woke up in a cold sweat after disturbing dreams. Moments when loneliness tightened around his chest like a vice. The crushing weight of carrying that reputation as a man of steel, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Because the hidden truth behind that facade was that Marcus hadn't chosen to be strong. He had chosen not to be weak, which is a completely different thing. He wasn't brave, he was terrified. Terrified that if he let his emotions in, they would swallow him whole, and he would disappear. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because what happened in Kandahar, Afghanistan, in August 2011, wasn't just a military tragedy. It was the moment Marcus's armor began to crack irreparably, even if he didn't know it at the time. The mission seemed routine, at least by Afghan standards. Marcus's platoon was tasked with escorting a supply convoy to an outpost in the mountains. It was the kind of operation they had done dozens of times, waking up before dawn, reviewing equipment, checking routes, maintaining constant radio contact. Jimmy Rodriguez, the corporal from San Antonio with a permanent smile on his face, was piloting the second armored vehicle. He and Marcus had become brothers in that hellish place, united by the kind of connection that only forms when you entrust your life to another person every day. Jimmy was everything Marcus wasn't. Extroverted, emotional, capable of crying while watching videos of dogs reuniting with their owners on his phone. He constantly talked about his family, about his sister who was in college, about his mother who made the best enchiladas in Texas, about his father who worked as a mechanic, and taught that real men aren't afraid to feel. Marcus mocked him for this, but deep down he felt a strange envy for Jimmy's ability to be so open, so human, even amidst the chaos of war. It was 10:20 a.m. when the first bomb exploded. An improvised device buried in the road, detonated remotely by insurgents hiding in the hills. The lead vehicle was thrown aside like a toy. Before anyone could process what was happening, the shooting began. Bullets raining from all directions, screams on the radio, black smoke engulfing the sky. Marcus went into autopilot, that mental state that training instills in you, where there's no time to think, only to react. He shouted orders, coordinated the response, kept the platoon organized while the world crumbled around them. It was Jimmy who saved Marcus that day. When Marcus left the cover to rescue a wounded soldier, he didn't see the sniper in the second-story window. Jimmy did, and without hesitation, he threw himself in front of Marcus, taking 3 bullets meant for the sergeant's chest. Marcus managed to drag Jimmy behind the cover, but it was too late. He held his friend in his arms as his life slipped away, saw Jimmy's eyes drift away, heard his last whispered words, "Take care of them for me, Marcus. And take care of yourself too, brother. Promise." Marcus didn't cry. Not then. Not during the medical evacuation. Not at the military funeral 3 weeks later in San Antonio, where Jimmy's mother collapsed over the coffin draped in the American flag. Marcus stood at attention, eyes fixed on some distant point on the horizon, face stone, jaw clenched. He received condolences with mechanical nods. He accepted the Medal of Honor for valor with firm hands. He returned to Afghanistan to complete his tour of duty as if nothing had happened, because soldiers don't cry, soldiers keep going. That was the philosophy he had etched into his mind like a sacred mantra. But something had changed inside him, something Marcus refused to acknowledge. He began to withdraw even further, isolating himself even when surrounded by his platoon. He stopped participating in casual conversations, the banter that eased the tension between missions. He threw himself into the work with an almost manic intensity, volunteering for all the most dangerous patrols, as if testing the limits of his own mortality. The other soldiers began to worry. Some tried to talk, but Marcus would deflect with dry jokes or abruptly change the subject. He was becoming a ghost, physically present but absent in every other aspect. Marcus's transformation into an empty shell of himself happened gradually, so slowly that no one noticed until it was too late. He completed his service in 2012 and was honorably discharged in early 2013. He returned to the United States, not as a conquering hero, but as a man lost in his own country. He chose Portland, Oregon, specifically because he knew no one there. He started from scratch, deliberately isolated, as if punishing himself for surviving when Jimmy did not. Marcus got a job at a construction company, manual labor, that left him physically exhausted enough to fall asleep at night, at least temporarily. He rented a small apartment on the outskirts of the city, furnished only with the essentials: a bed, a table, a chair. The bare walls echoed the emptiness he felt inside. His co-workers tried to include him in after-work happy hours and weekend barbecues, but Marcus always had an excuse ready, not because he didn't want company, but because he had forgotten how to be human in environments that didn't involve marching orders and death threats. The nightmares began about 6 months after his return. Every night, without exception, Marcus relived Kandahar. The explosion, the shooting, the weight of Jimmy in his arms, that final look. But even in his dreams, Marcus didn't cry. He would wake up at 3 in the morning drenched in sweat, heart racing, hands trembling, but his eyes remained dry. He would get up, take a cold shower, drink coffee, and wait for the sun to rise before returning to work. Rinse and repeat, every day without fail, without variation. Marcus's family, who still lived in Richmond, grew increasingly worried. His mother called every week, and every week Marcus assured her that everything was fine, that he was adjusting, that he would visit them soon. Lies he told with such conviction that he almost believed them. His younger brother Daniel made the car trip to Portland twice, trying to reconnect, but the conversations were superficial, full of awkward pauses. Daniel returned home telling his mother, "It's as if Marcus stayed there in Afghanistan. The guy who came back is just a faded photocopy." And Daniel was right. Marcus was physically present, but emotionally absent, functioning on autopilot, going through the basic motions of existence without truly living. He went to work, came home, ate frozen food in front of the television without paying attention to what was on, lay in bed and waited for the nightmares to arrive. On weekends, he ran miles and miles through the streets of Portland, punishing his body to exhaustion, as if physical pain could somehow erase the emotional pain he refused to acknowledge. Romantic relationships were impossible. Marcus tried a few times, dates arranged by well-meaning colleagues, but they never went beyond the second or third outing. The women quickly realized there was something profoundly disconnected about him, an insurmountable distance, as if there were a glass wall between Marcus and the rest of the world. He heard but didn't listen. He was present but didn't participate. He smiled but never truly rejoiced. One of the women, a teacher named Linda, told him frankly, "Marcus, you're kind and handsome, but it's like trying to have a relationship with a statue. You're here, but you're not, and I don't know how to reach you." She was right, but Marcus didn't know how to change that. Or perhaps, and this was the most terrifying truth, he didn't want to change. Because change would mean feeling, and feeling would mean opening that floodgate he had so carefully locked. And Marcus was absolutely certain that if he opened that floodgate, he would drown in the torrent. So he continued living in that gray area between life and death, neither fully alive nor completely dead, just existing, one day after another, week after week, month after month. 2 years passed like that. 2 years of Marcus pretending everything was fine, maintaining the facade for his family, going to work and returning home like a programmed robot. Until on March 15th, 2015, a package arrived at his apartment. The sender, Maria Rodriguez, San Antonio, Texas. Marcus stared at the box for a long time before opening it, his heart pounding strangely in his chest. He knew who Maria Rodriguez was, Jimmy's mother. But why would she be sending him something after so long? With hands that struggled to remain steady, Marcus opened the box. Inside, carefully wrapped, were Jimmy's personal belongings. The combat uniform he wore when not on duty, the medals he had earned, family photographs, letters his mother had sent during deployment. And at the bottom, wrapped in brown paper and tied with simple twine, was a worn, leather-bound notebook. A handwritten note was pinned to the front. "Marcus, I found this among Jimmy's things. I thought you should have it. He talked about you a lot. With love, Maria." Marcus placed the box on the kitchen table and avoided it for 3 whole days. He would go to work, come back, and there was the box. an accusing presence in the corner of his field of vision. He knew he needed to open it, but something held him back. Perhaps it was the fear of what he would find. Perhaps it was the premonition that this notebook had the power to change something fundamental within him. On the fourth night, unable to sleep, Marcus finally picked up the diary and opened the first page. The handwriting was unmistakably Jimmy's, those large, slanted letters he used to write mission reports. The first entry was from 2 months before deployment. "Mom is scared for me to go. I tried to explain that it's my duty, but she just cries. Sometimes I wonder if I'm doing the right thing. But when I look at Marcus, I see what kind of man I want to be. He's the strongest soldier I've ever known." Marcus felt something strange in his chest as he read that, an uncomfortable pressure he couldn't name. He turned the pages, reading about the first days in Afghanistan, about the unbearable heat, about the constant fear that Jimmy described with brutal honesty. "I have nightmares every night. I wake up thinking I'm going to die here. But I can't show it to the others. Only Marcus seems to have no fear. How does he manage?" Marcus almost laughed bitterly. Jimmy thought he wasn't afraid. If only he knew the truth. The entries grew deeper as the months passed. Jimmy wrote about missing his family, about the terrifying moments during missions, about comrades who had been killed or wounded. But he also wrote about moments of unexpected beauty. A sunset over the mountains, an Afghan child smiling as he received chocolate, the camaraderie among soldiers during the rare moments of peace. And he wrote about Marcus, constantly. "Marcus is my best friend here. I trust him with my life, but I worry about him. He never talks about what he feels. He never shows fear or sadness. Sometimes I wonder if he really doesn't feel anything, or if he's just keeping it all inside until it explodes." Marcus had to pause his reading regularly because his hands would start to tremble. Those words were touching on something he had buried so deep he didn't even know it still existed. He continued reading page after page until he reached the last entries written in the days leading up to the ambush. Jimmy had a premonition. He wrote about it with disturbing clarity. "I feel something is going to happen soon. I can't explain it, I just feel it. If I don't come back from this, I want my family to know that I died doing what I believed was right, and I want Marcus to know that he was the best friend I ever had." And then, on the last page, there was a letter, addressed directly to Marcus, undated, as if Jimmy knew it would be read at some uncertain future time. Marcus read the first line and had to stop, close his eyes, take a deep breath. His hands trembled so much he could barely hold the notebook. He forced his eyes open, forced himself to keep reading. "Marcus, brother, if you're reading this, it means I haven't come back, and I know exactly how you're dealing with it. You're not dealing with it. You're burying it, moving on, being the man of steel everyone thinks you are. But I know you, man. I see through that armor. And I worry about you, not because you're weak, but because you're too strong for your own good. You think being strong means not feeling. But I see you, Marcus. I see the weight you carry. I see how you punish yourself for things that aren't your fault. I see how you shut yourself off so you don't have to face the pain. And I'm afraid that if something happens to me, you'll lose yourself trying to be invincible. So I'm asking you something, not as your subordinate, but as your brother. Promise you'll live. Not just exist, but truly live. Promise you'll cry when you need to, that you'll let people in, that you'll seek help if the darkness gets too great. Because, Marcus, you deserve to be happy. You deserve to feel joy again. You deserve to be human. And I don't want my death to be another brick in that wall you've built around your heart. If I die saving you, as I have a feeling will happen, then you have to promise me you'll honor that by living fully. Don't honor me by closing yourself off. Honor me by opening up. Okay, brother? I love you, man. I always will. Be happy for me. Jimmy. Marcus read the letter 3 times. The first time, his hands trembled. The second time, his vision blurred. The third time, something inside him finally broke. That crack in his armor that had begun in Kandahar transformed into a giant fissure, and through it gushed everything Marcus had repressed for 12 years. The pain of losing Jimmy, the guilt of having survived, the anger at the injustice of the war, the fear of never feeling whole again, the crushing loneliness of living like a ghost, and the tears he had held back for so long, finally came. Marcus collapsed right there on the cold kitchen floor of his empty Portland apartment, clutching Jimmy's diary to his chest as if it were the most precious thing in the world. And he cried. He cried for the 2 years he had wasted merely existing. He cried for all the comrades he had lost in the war. He cried for the version of himself that had remained buried under layers and layers of emotional repression. He cried until he had no more tears, until his throat was raw, until his eyes swelled. And when he finally stopped, exhausted and broken on the ground, Marcus felt something he hadn't felt in years: hope. Because for the first time since Jimmy died, for the first time since he returned from the war, for the first time in 12 long years, Marcus had allowed something to penetrate his armor, and he hadn't been destroyed by it. He was still breathing. He was still there, and maybe, just maybe, Jimmy was right. Maybe crying wasn't weakness. Maybe it was exactly what he needed to stay alive. If this part of the story is affecting you, if you've ever felt trapped in this emotional armor that seems impossible to remove, comment below, "Promise fulfilled, brother." The following morning, his eyes still swollen and his soul still fragile, Marcus did something he never imagined he would do. He picked up the phone and called the VA hospital in Portland. He asked for information about therapy for veterans. The receptionist, accustomed to calls like this, was kind and patient as Marcus, his voice choked with emotion, explained that he needed help. She scheduled an appointment for the following week with Dr. Sarah Mitchell, a psychologist specializing in war trauma. That week was one of the longest of Marcus's life. He almost gave up 3 times. He almost canceled the appointment. He almost convinced himself that he was overreacting, that he could handle it alone as he always had. But every time he thought about giving up, he reread Jimmy's letter. "Do you promise you'll seek help if the darkness gets too great?" And Marcus had made a promise to a dead brother, and that promise was the only thing keeping him on track. Dr. Mitchell was a woman in her 50s with gray hair tied in a loose bun and eyes that had seen much pain over the years. She didn't force Marcus to talk. She simply said, "I'm here when you're ready." And for the first time, Marcus began to speak. Slowly at first, stumbling over words, pausing frequently. But eventually the words began to flow. He talked about his childhood, about learning that crying was unacceptable, about the war, about Jimmy, about the 2 years of emptiness that followed. Dr. Mitchell listened to everything without judgment, and when Marcus finished, she said something he would never forget. "Marcus, you've spent your whole life believing you had to carry everything alone, that asking for help was admitting defeat. But the truth is, you were already defeated. The armor you built wasn't protecting you. It was suffocating you. And the fact that you're here today, vulnerable and scared, isn't weakness. It's the bravest thing you've ever done." The healing process was neither quick nor linear. Marcus began attending therapy sessions weekly. He joined a support group for veterans, where for the first time he heard other men speaking openly about nightmares, survivor's guilt, and the difficulty of reintegration. He realized he wasn't alone, that his pain wasn't unique or shameful, but shared by thousands of men and women who had served their country and returned forever changed. There were bad days. Days when Marcus wanted to give up on everything and go back to that grey comfort zone where he felt nothing. Days when the nightmares were so intense he could barely get out of bed. But Dr. Mitchell taught him something fundamental. Crying wasn't weakness. It was the only way to keep breathing. And Marcus learned to cry. He learned to feel anger and express it in a healthy way. He learned to acknowledge guilt and work through it instead of burying it. Small victories began to appear. The first time Marcus was able to talk about Jimmy in a group session without having a panic attack. The first time he slept through the night without nightmares. The first time he truly laughed. A genuine laugh that caught him by surprise. Each victory was small, but significant, a step toward becoming human again. About 6 months after starting therapy, Marcus did something unexpected. He moved to Seattle and began volunteering with a program for transitioning veterans. He used his own journey, his own pain, to help other men and women who were struggling with the same demons. Marcus discovered that sharing his story didn't make him weak, but powerful. That his vulnerability gave others permission to be vulnerable too. It was during a lecture at a community center that Marcus met Rachel. She was a nurse at the VA hospital, a green-eyed woman who had lost her younger brother in Iraq 5 years earlier. They talked for hours after the event, sharing stories, connecting through their shared grief. For the first time since returning from the war, Marcus was able to open up to someone without feeling that glass wall between them. Rachel understood. She had walked through the same dark valley and come out the other side. Their relationship grew slowly, carefully, two survivors learning to trust again. Rachel didn't try to fix Marcus, and he didn't try to fix her. They simply existed together, offering support when needed, giving space when needed, building something new on top of the ruins of the past. It wasn't perfect. There were hard days, relapses, arguments about things they didn't even know they were feeling. But there were also laughs, plans for the future, the feeling that life was worth living again. Marcus also began to reconnect with his family. He visited Richmond for the first time in 3 years, and this time it was different. He was able to be honest with his mother about how much he had struggled. He was able to cry in her arms without feeling ashamed. His brother Daniel said that he finally had Marcus back. Not the Marcus from before the war, but a new, deeper, more real version. In 2018, 3 years after reading Jimmy's diary, Marcus made a decision that would change not only his life, but the lives of hundreds of veterans. He created the Jimmy Rodriguez Foundation. The mission was simple but powerful: to offer free emotional support to veterans throughout Texas and Oregon, the states that Jimmy and Marcus called home. The foundation organized retreats where soldiers could, literally and figuratively, take off their armor in safety, where they could cry without judgment, scream if they needed to, simply exist without having to be invincible all the time. Jimmy's mother, Maria, became one of the foundation's biggest supporters. She and Marcus developed a special relationship, united by the memory of the man they both loved. Maria told Marcus, "You are keeping Jimmy alive in the best way possible. He always wanted to help people, and through you, he is still helping." Marcus began giving talks at military bases, universities, and community events. He told his story unfiltered, without hiding the ugly or embarrassing parts. He spoke about the 12 years he went without crying, about how he almost lost himself completely, about the diary that saved him. And at the end of each talk, he read excerpts from Jimmy's letter, allowing those words to touch other people in the same way they had touched him. "Jimmy saved me twice," Marcus used to say. "Once in Kandahar, when he threw himself in front of the bullets meant for me, and another time through that diary, when he taught me that it takes courage to feel. The first time he saved my body, the second time he saved my soul." In the summer of 2019, Marcus took a trip he had been putting off for years. He and Rachel drove to Arlington National Cemetery in Virginia, where Jimmy was buried. Marcus carried two things: a bound copy of Jimmy's diary, which Maria had allowed him to keep, and a letter. A reply letter he had written the night before, pouring out everything that was in his heart. Standing before the simple gravestone that marked Jimmy's resting place, Marcus read the letter aloud. Rachel stood a few steps away, giving him space but present for support. The words came easily this time, without stumbling, without hesitation. Promise fulfilled, brother. I'm living, not just existing, but truly living. I'm feeling everything, the good and the bad, the joy and the pain. I'm here, Jimmy. I'm still here. And I finally understand what you tried to teach me. That tears aren't the end of strength. They're proof that we're still human. You knew me better than I knew myself. And I wasted so much time trying to be invincible when I should have just been myself. Marcus folded the letter and placed it at the foot of the gravestone, along with a small American flag. He stood there for a long time, his hand on the cold stone, allowing himself to feel the pain of the loss, but also the gratitude for the friendship, for the lesson, for the second chance that Jimmy had given him through that diary. As they walked back to the car, Rachel took Marcus's hand. "He would be proud of you," she said softly. And Marcus knew it was true. He had honored Jimmy not by building a monument or becoming a famous war hero, but simply by learning to be human again. Learning that true strength lies not in never falling, but in having the courage to get up and ask for help. That vulnerability is not weakness, but the essence of genuine courage. That it's okay not to be okay as long as you don't pretend to be. Marcus's story doesn't have a perfect fairy tale ending. He still has bad days. He still has occasional nightmares. He still struggles with survivor's guilt at unexpected moments. But now he has the tools to cope. He has a support network. He has purpose. He has love. And above all, he has the freedom to feel, to be imperfect, to be human. The lesson Marcus learned, and which he shares with every veteran who comes through the Jimmy Rodriguez Foundation, is simple yet revolutionary. You don't have to carry everything alone. You don't have to be invincible. You don't have to hide your pain behind a mask of strength. Because true strength, the strength that lasts, the strength that heals, comes from recognizing our vulnerability and having enough courage to ask for help. If you've made it this far with me on this journey, first, I want to thank you. Stories like this aren't easy to tell, and I know they aren't easy to hear either, but they are important. They remind us that transformation is possible, even after the worst storms. If this message resonated with you in any way, leave a comment saying, "This message was for me." I want to know you're there, that this touched you in some way. And if you're not yet subscribed to the channel, now's the time. Every week I bring you real stories like this one, of people who transformed pain into purpose, darkness into light, despair into hope. Stories that prove it's never too late to start over. Leave a like too, because that shows me that this content is meaningful, that it's worth continuing to share these journeys with you. There's a video over here about another veteran who found redemption in a completely unexpected way. Click and stay with me there, because I think you'll connect with this story too. See you soon.